All right, well, the first federal trial against alleged Antifa domestic terrorists accused of ambushing and shooting a police officer at a Texas ICE detention center was abruptly declared a mistrial just hours into jury selection.
The decision came after a defense attorney's politically charged T-shirt halted the process, with the judge saying, quote, "I don't know why in the world you would think that's appropriate."
Well, joining us now is Fox News legal analyst Gregg Jarrett. Greg, so great to have you on the program. Just so all of our viewers are aware exactly what was on this T-shirt of the defense attorney representing these accused Antifa terrorists. It was a photo of Martin Luther King Jr. and Shirley Chisholm. Greg, you're an attorney. Take us through what the problem with that was and why the judge is now saying that sanctions might be imposed on this attorney.
Yeah, well, Lydia, good to be with you. That is such an idiotic, sophomoric move by the defense attorney to wear a civil rights T-shirt identifying icons of the movement. You know, he ought to be heavily sanctioned by the judge on the grounds of rank stupidity. It is blatantly prejudicial. It was done intentionally by this lawyer to unduly influence the jury, and it caused a mistrial that wasted the court's time and resources. But, you know, I will say my concern about this case is that in the initial pool of potential jurors, around 20 of them said, we oppose ICE efforts to combat illegal immigration. So that tells me that the defense here is aiming for jury nullification. That is to say, ignore all of the compelling evidence of guilt and decide for yourself that this law is simply unjust, so we're going to ignore it. And my goodness, in a case like this, that would send a very tragic message. This was a deliberate, organized ambush on federal officers, one of whom was shot in the neck. Thankfully, he survived. And jury nullification would send an incredibly troubling signal that it's okay to shoot ICE agents because we hate them and we hate Donald Trump's policy of enforcing the law. That would mean it's sort of open season on ICE, and that would be deadly.
And you've got other cases and potential trials happening in other states, Minnesota, obviously one of them. Is that your broader concern, Greg, that nationwide you'll have this same sort of dynamic playing out?
Yeah, it is. That people will simply, on the jury, decide for themselves, I'm going to base my decision not on the facts or the law or the evidence. I'm going to base it on my personal opinion, my feelings, that I just don't like ICE. I don't like enforcing the law. And again, you know, jury nullification comes into play, and it is an unfettered right that jurors have. They may decide among themselves, oh, yeah, the defendant's totally guilty, but we just don't like the policy, so we're going to let this person go free.
Greg, we've got our eye on Friday for the next day that the Supreme Court is going to release their opinions. And of course, the world is still waiting for the Supreme Court's decision on the tariff case. You know, initially, after oral arguments in November, there was speculation that maybe we could get an opinion from the Supreme Court. Some said by the end of last year. Others were saying by January. Now we're well into February, Greg. I'm curious your thoughts. Does it feel like we're waiting longer than what we should have been waiting for, what we expected, and what that timeline, this length of time to consider this opinion, what that means for the potential outcome?
Well, Lydia, it's a very complicated case. And I listened to the oral arguments in November, and it appeared as if Trump would lose this one. But, you know, this delay sort of gives me pause. Remember, Trump claimed emergency powers to regulate imports, which, by the way, was a right that Congress gave to presidents. But, you know, the justices were kind of hung up on whether these are really in disguise taxation tariffs, which is the sole power of Congress. So the court could be struggling with the remedy. How do we craft it? And I think there are three options. They could say, here are the guidelines on invoking this power. We send it back to the lower courts to decide whether Trump met those rules. Or option two, they could say that the president can invoke other trade laws on the books to achieve the same results. That's my bet. And still a third option is to make their ruling prospective, not retroactive, which would allow the existing tariffs to remain. There is one other factor here. I mean, how in the world do you refund billions of dollars? Is that left to the lower courts? Who decides that? Or do the justices say, you know what, no refunds are needed this time, but in the future, you'll have to do refunds? This is a lot more complicated than people think.
And I suspect the time they're taking may be related to sorting out some of those complications. Gregg, we got to leave it there. Always great to see you. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Gregg.
Thanks so much, Brian.